My name is Michael Carlos, and I am Biologist Director with the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. It's a consortium of a lot of agencies, state and federal agencies, as well as NGOs, which of course gives you a lot of power, I think. It's a consolidated voice. And in times of climate change, especially in coastal Louisiana, where I am very familiar with this conservation cooperative, it's vital, and I think it's gonna help to get the message out and to look at species that are imperiled and to try to address them appropriately. And being, I guess, a biologist with the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries and growing up along the coast in Louisiana and dealing with a lot of these species and habitats, I think that gives me a vital role, hopefully, to be able to get some of that information out to the group, to be able to use that in a beneficial way for species and for habitats. It gets all of the appropriate agencies that are involved on the same page, essentially, through meetings, through conference calls, and it unites a common voice, essentially, with all these members. And it gets information out of a group of people that all have their biases and interest in this particular landscape conservation area. So it's it works in that way, and then it helps to facilitate programs and projects and direct money to things that we feel are most appropriate. One specifically is dealing with trying to get our voice heard along the Gulf Coast, and most of this LCC is coastal marshes of Louisiana and goes into Texas, but as far as for the Louisiana portion, this LCC is pretty much all coastal marshes and prairies. And I've been heavily involved in oil spills and instances like that. So we have Restore Act with a lot of potential money coming down, and we have opportunities, I think, to highlight habitats and species that are extremely important. And this is a way, and we're working through that now to try to get that voice, get our voice heard, and to try to be part of that selection in terms of how maybe restoration efforts are done along the coast and things like that. I think the LCCs are a necessary approach to addressing conservation, again, because they're a consortium of lots of different groups, agencies, state and federal, and NGOs, and people that know and care and know what the issues are on a landscape scale, and that's pretty unique. We typically, as state agencies, for example, that I'm part of, you typically have more tunnel vision. You deal with things that your work specifically entails, and it may be very narrow. But this, I think, gives you the opportunity to expand at a large scale, again, at a landscape scale, across state lines. So there are no true jurisdictional boundaries. And I think that's a way to get this to work, by having so many people involved, so many different interests, but uniting on a common front, and looking at, again, the issues with sea level rise and other climate change issues. Some of the changes that are coming about through climate change with these issues are sea level rise, droughts, and probably increases in storms such as hurricanes, which we've seen more recently. And I think the LCC, the role that they can take and to try to maybe not so much offset, but to look at ways to offset changes to this habitat and species that are impacted by it, is to realize what the issues are and to try to address them and to get that message out and to look and divert money and look at projects that are most beneficial to these habitats or that are most imperiled. For instance, barrier islands along the coast of Texas and Louisiana. Those are critical habitats to many species of nesting birds and migrating birds as well. And I think that's a good example. Sea level rise, again, land loss issues, you know, ways that we can look at the best mechanisms and the best science out there to be able to restore areas like that, and the species, and focus on the species that are most impacted by that, I think is critical.